So a couple of people have commented on our car ownership and keeping an older car videos, and they've mentioned that they do a Bangernomics. So this is a video about Bangernomics. What is Bangernomics? We've heard of economics, but Bangernomics is something specific to the car community, and it's an ethos of car ownership that can save a substantial amount of money in the long run. So we're just going to look at this as a concept. We're going to analyze the typical things that people will do if they want to have a Bangernomic approach to car ownership, and also a few things that we should bear in mind so that we don't get caught out with expensive cars that are going to come back and bite us with high costs of repairs. So Bangernomics is really taking depreciation out of car ownership. You buy an old car, a banger, hence the term Bangernomics, and you run it as long as possible and you neglect it. You don't fix everything that goes wrong on it unless there's a major thing that is quite easy to fix. So in the case of repairs coming up, if the cost of repair excessively exceeds the cost of replacing the car, it's probably time to get rid of that banger and buy another one. So does this work in practice? Well, it certainly depends on the car. You can buy another banger for the same money and get a real dog of a car that takes a lot of your resources to keep it on the road and is just totally unreliable. So some people will opt to stay with the devil they know and keep the car they've got running as long as they can, but within a budget or within constraints. So if the bills start racking up to a certain level, they'll then at that point ditch the car and move on. So imagine buying a £600 car every year and just running it for a year. You can still get a reasonable runner with an MOT for £600 in most areas. And all that car is going to cost you is £600 per year. The car insurance is going to be cheaper because it's an older car. It may not be quite as economical as some of the modern fuel efficient cars, but you could also argue that a lot of the modern cars are bigger and therefore less fuel efficient. And they also have other costs associated with running them, all these pollution controls, the EGR problems, the DPF problems that people have been telling us about. So you'll avoid all of that hassle of car ownership just by sticking with this older concept of Bangernomics. The illustrated cost of running the banger is £600 per year. So you either buy a new banger for £600, or maybe you've had a few repairs that have been needed or a set of tyres, something like that. You're still within that £600 a year budget. So keep the car running as long as possible. Now compare that with buying a new car or a newer car. You spend say 20,000 on a car. In 3 years, the value of that drops to about 8,000 to 10,000. Straight away, you've lost about half of the money you invested in that car. So you factor that down over the 3-year period and you're looking at multiples of thousands per year just to own the car in depreciation. So Bangernomics has already saved you a substantial amount of money. Now the trick is choosing the right banger. There's a lot of cars out there that are cheap that I wouldn't touch with the barge pole. So what would I be looking for? First of all, I would be looking at a car that is reliable, a brand that is notoriously reliable, and I'd like to buy a relatively well looked after example as well. So the ideal situation is maybe someone's retired and given up driving, or a family member has died and it's their car. So they're not selling it because they're fed up with it. They're selling it because they have to. They've got no choice. And you can get some real bargains, some real good cars that have just become rather old. They've depreciated to the point where they're pretty much not going to depreciate anymore. So that's the first thing. I would look for these reliable brands. So we straight away start to think about Honda, Toyota, the Japanese car brands for the supreme reliability. But a lot of the older German cars are also very, very reliable. So do your research. Depending on your budget and where you live, there may be different manufacturers of cars that have that essence of reliability that you're after. So let me know in the comments what you feel would be the best brands to buy if you were looking for an old banger and you were going to go into Bangernomics in a big way. Just make sure that the car has got a service history. You need evidence that it's had basic oil changes at regular intervals and it's been looked after by a garage as well, just to make sure that you're not going to get any unexpected bills. The large things that need to have been done typically are the clutch and the cam belt or the cam tensioner chain and the tensioners and the cam chain. All those wear and tear items do need replacing after say 7 years, 70,000 miles, check the service book, the recommendations from the manufacturer, and just make sure that they've been done, because they can lead to quite expensive bills that will push you out of your Bangernomics, your £600 per year target that we've set. So learn to maintain the car yourself. Simple maintenance things, just changing the oil yourself. You'll save quite a bit of money just doing that, and that will keep the car as reliable as possible. I know some people would argue that you just don't do that on a Banger. You're only going to keep it for a year, so it really doesn't matter. So factor that in. Let me know your comments on that argument. But certainly looking after an old Banger, you may get 2 or 3 years use out of it, whereas normally you may only get 1 year if you particularly neglected it. So we walk a fine line, really, don't we, between looking after the car and neglecting it and just keeping it running. We really want to be in that middle bracket where we just keep it running. We're not spending too much on the car. So also avoid overly complex cars with lots of gadgets, lots of features. They have more things to go wrong. So I was always told by my granddad and my dad that windy windows were simple. You knew where you were. And with electric windows, you've got another expense that comes along when they start to fail. So one of the key things we should do really is set a budget, run the numbers, and decide at what point we get rid of the Banger and we buy another one. We need to do that before we start experiencing problems. Because when we start experiencing problems, the little bit of our brain kicks in that wants to keep hold of the car. You want the easy life, better the devil you know. And that mentality can lock us into a car that is going to become rather unreliable and is going to start running up excessive amounts of repair bills. So buying cheap is not glamorous, but it is financially liberating. You don't have finance hanging over your head on the car. You've got more money to play with. One of the comments said that he invested the money that he would have spent in depreciation over the years, and he's now retired and sitting on a nice little nest egg. So make your money work smarter for you rather than buy a depreciating asset. We want to make our money work for us as best we can. So Bangernomics is all about practicality and efficiency. I don't think many people would want to go to Bangernomics and run an absolute disaster looking car. I know some people do go for this rat style of car where they're covered in rust, and the idea is that the car looks absolutely terrible but runs quite well. They may even have had a souped up engine in there. But Bangernomics, there's a whole movement of people getting into Bangernomics nowadays, particularly with this rising cost of living. So let me know if this is something you've considered, something you've done your whole life or you've done relatively recently. And please share your experiences, because it's your comments really that give me ideas for future videos. And often people have an experience that gives me an angle on something that I've never thought of before. So I learn a lot from you guys. I really do appreciate all the comments. When thinking about Bangernomics, it's just handy to have in our mind the potential costs that we're going to experience over a 12-month period of ownership. So just taking 2 cars as an example, we'll go for pluck it out of the air. A 2002 will be the year. We've got a Volkswagen Polo, a 1.4 with 17-inch wheels. And we'll compare that to the running cost of an Audi A4, again, a 2002, but the Audi A4 has got 18-inch wheels and it's the 2-litre FSI engine. So everything on the A4 is going to be slightly bigger. I've picked these, they're quite extreme, but generally speaking, the Audi A4 will hit quite a bit of depreciation and the Polo will hold on to its value quite well. So at this sort of age, you should probably be able to pick up one of each at the same price. But are they going to cost you the same amount to run over a 12-month period? Well, we just have to factor in the typical costs we're going to experience. If we're particularly unfortunate, we may have to get the cam belt changed. Now, that can be quite pricey and it certainly depends where you go to. On the Volkswagen Polo, the general cost that I've seen just asking around and talking to people in the trade is about £400 to £500. On the Audi A4, the 2-litre TFSI engine, it's going to cost a bit more than that. You're looking at about £500 to £600 to replace that. So let's assume as well that the tyres need replacing. Now, they won't need replacing every year unless we're a particularly aggressive driver. We should also bear in mind that potentially on the 2-litre Audi A4, you're going to get through the tyres more quickly than on the lighter Volkswagen Polo. But we'll just look at the replacement cost of a set of tyres for both of these cars. So on the Volkswagen Polo, you're looking at about 300 to 350 for a set of 4. And a comparable set of 4 for the Audi A4, because it's got the 18-inch rims, will be about 450 to 500. So we're obviously talking about budget tyres here. You can obviously go to about 225, 250 per tyre if you want the premium tyres, but it's Bangernomics. We're trying to do things on a budget, so we're going to go for fairly cheap tyres. But you can see already there's quite a big difference in the maintenance costs between the two cars. Now, if you factor in a brake pad change, which is another fairly likely thing we'll have to do during the course of ownership. So if we were just planning to keep it for a year and ditch it, you're probably going to get away with it. But if not, you may get hit with replacing the brake pads. So on the Volkswagen Polo, the brake pad replacement cost is about £100 to £130. On the Audi A4, they're bigger and more expensive, so they're going to cost 150 to about 180 pounds. So the other thing we're definitely going to need to do is service the car. Obviously, servicing the car is going to keep it running, it's going to keep it reliable. So you might feel that you're not going to bother servicing it, but that oil change and the filter change really will help to maintain the reliability of the car. So if you are looking at keeping it for more than a year, it's certainly worth thinking about getting it serviced. And again, the servicing costs are going to be different on these two cars. So an oil and filter change on the Volkswagen Polo will be about 150 to 200 pounds. On the A4, you're looking at about 200 to 250 pounds. So everything again is slightly higher. So let's just total up what we spent on these two cars. Now, I'm happy to assume that we're not going to spend this every year. We might be looking at a 3-year expenditure window. So we can divide these figures by 3, and obviously the cam belt replacement is potentially a 7-year replacement window, so we may be fortunate, we might get away with it, but chances are it's going to be coming up to the time when a cam belt needs to be done, because that's probably why the car has been sold in the first place, and that's quite a big chunk of the cost of the car. So a Volkswagen Polo will cost us about 950 to 1,160 to run with those expenses I've just listed. The Audi A4 running cost will be about 1,350 to 1,530. So straight away, although the costs of the cars would have been similar when we purchased it, the running costs are going to be much higher. Now, I have seen people get caught out. They have bought an S3. It was an absolute bargain. No one wanted it. And they've just run up extortionate amounts of repair bills. So be very careful when we buy a car. Look into these things. The brakes and tyres are obvious things that we're probably going to need to do. But is that cam belt due? If the cam belt is due, how much is that going to cost us? That can put a big dent in our Bangernomic budget if we're not careful. So let me know if you think that was a fair comparison, and if you're aware of any cars that are particularly cheap to run. I've just run my eye down Auto Trader to see what's available for under £1,000 at the moment, and there are a couple of Toyota Corollas. Now, they have a fantastic reputation for reliability, so it's unlikely anything is going to go wrong with those. But obviously other cars, we may have problems with the fuel injectors, the pipes may start to leak, there may be electrical problems. So it's certainly a good idea just to investigate the common weak spots and find out if these weak spots have already been addressed, or if they're likely bills that we're going to face in the future. And also, if that car has been maintained well and looked after throughout its life, we're going to have an easier job maintaining it and keeping it running. Whereas if it's been neglected, all of those repair costs and bills have come to us and we're going to be stuck with those. But if we were purely doing Bangernomics to keep a car for a year and ditch it, we probably won't bother with any of this maintenance, and we just run the car and keep it legal. But most people doing this will only just keep it legal. So I'll let you discuss the merits of doing that in the comment section below. So thanks for watching. Please boot the like button. That really does help us to get out there. And I've lined this video and this playlist up for you. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so. Thanks for watching.